Hi everyone! In the last few videos, we explored the step-by-step process of populating the vast terrain in our project with trees and shrubs to create the look of a Pacific Northwest forest landscape. In the next few videos, we'll explore the process of how to create textures for the mountain regions, grasslands, and snow-covered peaks. We'll cover a variety of techniques, including how to use procedural shaders, image maps, and function nodes to create materials and masks, and make extensive use of Terragen's ability to create parent and child relationships between surface layers. Let's get started by clicking on the Shaders button on the top toolbar to bring up the Shaders node list. By default, there is one shader present in the shader node list named Base Colors. This node is a variation of the Power Fractal node, and we'll use it to provide the lowest level color information to our terrain. Typically, this layer might equate to the dirt layer on which a grass layer would be added later. So we'll choose dark color values with low contrast as the base material of our terrain. To define the mountain regions for the purpose of texturing, we'll add a new surface layer to the shader group. The surface layer shader has many features built into it, including the ability to limit its influence to specific altitudes or slopes. At the top of the shader node list, click on the Add Layer button to add a new surface layer to the project, and rename it to something descriptive like Mountains. As you can see in the 3D preview, adding the surface layer shader changed the color of the entire terrain. In effect, it is overriding all the color information from the shader nodes upstream from it in the node network. We want to limit the textures we apply through this surface layer to only the mountain regions of the terrain. And to do that, we'll use the surface layer slope constraints parameters. Click on the Limit Minimum Slope checkbox to enable the constraint. Then, set the minimum slope angle value to about 15 degrees. This means that in order for a given point on the surface of the terrain to receive the texture from the surface layer, it must have a slope of at least 15 degrees. Now, set the minimum slope fuzzy zone value to 5. The fuzzy zone parameter controls how quickly the transition occurs from no surface layer coverage to full surface layer coverage. Smaller values will make the transition occur more quickly and visually create a harder and more defined edge, whereas larger values make the transition occur more slowly and over a greater distance, and can be used to create soft blends between shaders and textures. In the 3D preview, we can now see the areas of the terrain affected by the surface layer shader, and if the texture effect is subtle, we can always click on the Enable Test Color checkbox in order to see the affected areas in a color of our choice. The test color can easily be changed by clicking on the Color Swatch button to the right and choosing a new color. Now that we've defined where the mountain textures will be applied, let's give this area some color by assigning a Power Fractal shader in the surface layer's color function parameter. In the Color tab, click on the green plus button to the right of the color function. Then select Create New Shader, then Color Shader, and then Power Fractal Shader. Click on the green plus button again, and select Go to Power Fractal Shader to open up the Power Fractal settings. Then rename it to something descriptive like Mountain Colors. Under the Color tab, set the Apply High Color value to a dark shade of green. And then apply Low Color value to a dark shade of brown. Be sure to enable the checkbox for Apply Low Color. The Power Fractal shader provides a good color for the overall mountain slopes. But we want the sheer cliffs of the mountains, which have been exposed to the weather and elements, to have their own texture. And to do this, we can take advantage of Terragen's ability to add child layers to a surface layer. A child layer will inherit the same masking constraints as its parent layer. With the mountain surface layer selected in the shader node list, click on the Add Child Layer button and select Surface Layer. Rename the new surface layer something descriptive like Sheer Cliffs. Just like before, the child surface layer has overwritten all the color information from the shader nodes upstream of it, within the constraints set on it by its parent, the mountain surface layer. Let's limit the influence of the child surface layer by enabling its slope constraints just like we did for its parent layer. Under the Slope Constraints tab, enable the Limit Minimum Slope checkbox and set the minimum slope angle value to 40. Then set the minimum slope fuzzy zone value to 20. With the cliff areas now defined by the slope constraints, we can create their texture by assigning a new power fractal shader to the color function parameter. To create the look of a rocky cliff surface exposed to the elements, we'll start by setting the feature scale value to 25 and set the y-axis value of the noise stretch XYZ parameter to 2 in order to stretch the noise pattern a bit more in the vertical direction. Terragen provides a number of different types of noise patterns to choose from in order to get the look we want. Under the Tweak Noise tab, set the noise flavor to Perlin Ridges. Then, under the Color tab, give the Apply High Color and Apply Low Color values grayish color values. And fine-tune the noise pattern by adjusting the color contrast and color offset values. As the 3D preview updates, you can now see bare areas of rock on the sheer cliffs. Some areas of the terrain look as if a rock slide has occurred, and in previous videos, we created a mask using a painted shader to define these areas. Now let's use that mask along with a photograph or an image of a rocky surface to create the textures for these areas. In the shader node list, create a new surface layer and rename it to something descriptive like rock slides. Just as with the previous surface layers, the new rock slide surface layer has overwritten all the shader nodes upstream from it in the project workflow. To limit the surface layer to only the rock slide areas, assign the painted shader mask for the rock slide area to the mask by shader parameter of the surface layer. To apply a photograph or image map as a texture to this area, click on the green plus button to the right of the color function parameter and choose Create New Shader, then Color Shader, and then Image Map Shader. Then navigate to the location of your images and choose one to load it into the project. At first, the color of the rock slide area may appear black, and this is because we need to select the correct projection mode, position, and size for the image. Open the Image Map Shader settings by clicking on the green plus button to the right of the color function parameter again and selecting Go to Image Map Shader 01. In the Projection Location tab, we can see that Terragen's default projection type is set to Plan Y, edges equals XZ, which projects the image down onto the terrain. And this is what we want. Choose Position Center as the position type in order to position the image based on its center, and set the size values to match the width and height of the image resolution, which is displayed beneath the size fields. This will give us a ratio of 1 pixel per meter as a starting point, and we can adjust the size values if the texture seems too repetitive or pixelated. In the Flip Repeat tab, enable the Repeat X and Repeat Y checkboxes so that the image is tiled across the entire terrain. Now the texture should show up in the rock slide areas. Next, we want to add a specific texture to the now solidified lava flow down the face of the dormant volcano. Add one more surface layer to the project and give it a descriptive name like lava flow. Just as with the rock slide surface layer, we'll limit this surface layer by masking it with a painted shader that defines the location of the lava flow. We want the exposed lava flow topography to be darker than the surrounding ground, so assign a new power fractal shader to the lava flow surface layer's color function. And adjust the Apply High Color and Apply Low Color values to darken the surface. You can adjust the other power fractal parameters to dial in the look you want. As you can see, it's very easy in Terragen to create textures for a terrain using procedural textures and image maps. Now that we've established these basic textures for the ground, mountains, and lava flow regions of the terrain, we can add multiple surface layers to build up the grasslands and meadow areas, which will be the subject of our next video. We hope you enjoyed this video and learned something new. Thanks for watching.